Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Sarah Clarke-De Reza, and I'm proud to present this work on behalf of our project team. The title of our talk today is Lessons from the Belizean Past, Teaching and Learning with Objects in a Community Museum. Let's start with a question. What can we learn from looking closely at a Caliban and a styrofoam food container? What role do these objects play in the story of human and environment interaction in Belize? And how can we, as educators, use objects like these to tell essential stories about who we are and where we live? In this presentation, we will share what I'm going to call object lessons, 2 stories from the Crooked Tree Museum and Cultural Heritage Center that show the ways we can become better at looking at and understanding the stuff of history, and in turn, using it to teach. Let me begin first with an introduction to our project team. As I said, my name is Dr. Sarah De Reza, and I'm a professor of education who specializes in museum learning at Washington College in Chestertown, Maryland. Since 2017, I've had the pleasure of working with the team of people who established and now maintain the Crooked Tree Museum and Cultural Heritage Center in Crooked Tree. I'm joined today by Dr. Eleanor Harrison-Buck, a professor of anthropology at the University of New Hampshire and the director of the Belize River East Archaeology Project. Dr. Harrison-Buck was a principal collaborator in the Crooked Tree Museum and remains a member of the board. Much of the Crooked Tree Museum's success was and is dependent on collaboration with cultural heritage educators and experts from around Belize and across niche. Our other 2 co-presenters today, Cindy Rivero and Yahaira Vega, provided guidance throughout the museum development process and were key collaborators on a 2019 teacher workshop hosted between Banquitas House of Culture and Orange Walk and the museum in Crooked Tree. We will share more about this collaboration in our presentation today. So let's begin with our first object lesson. What can we learn from a styrofoam food container? In summer 2019, Yahaira, Cindy, Ellie, and I organized a day-long workshop for Belizean educators interested in providing more museum-based learning to their students. Our goal was to improve teachers' effective use of museum visits to build student interest and aptitude in science, art, and social studies curriculum content. We began at Banquitas House of Culture, where Cindy and Yahaira provided a model tour of their museum space and introduced teachers to the resources and content available throughout niche and the houses of culture. We then traveled to the Crooked Tree Museum for educational research and curriculum writing sessions. The following slides come from our presentation that day. Together, we discussed the value of museums for teaching students about history and cultural heritage, best practices for museum instruction, and evidence for the value of objects as opportunities for inquiry. We shared our experiences too, as museum educators and archaeologists. Both perspectives have shown us that close looking at everyday things improves our observation and critical thinking about the world, creates opportunities to ask bigger questions about people, place, history, science, and technology, and creates opportunity for conversations and connections between people and across multiple generations. I want to take a moment to talk a bit more about those 3 important points before diving into our object lessons. Many scholars have discussed the value of teaching people to look closely or to read objects. Some of our inspiration from this work comes from a 1982 article by museum educator John Shu called Teaching Yourself to Teach with Objects. This accessibly written essay is widely available online. John Shu illustrates how objects of all kind are naturally fascinating to people because they are made and used by people. Unlike written materials, they're similarly accessible to people of all ages. His essay shows us how looking closely at objects can engage curiosity, even about seemingly mundane parts of daily life. Objects can help us develop critical inquiry and argumentation skills and can support interest and passion for a wide range of subjects. However, in order for objects to be truly useful as instructional tools, or to work as prompts for deeper questioning, people need to learn to read them just the same way they learn to read a book. Because we believe in the power of objects to help people become careful, critical observers of the material world, we decided to help our teacher workshop participants develop their object reading skills by looking closely together at something many of us encounter daily: a styrofoam lunch tray. We showed teachers this slide, gave them a tray to examine, and asked them to partner with someone next to them to answer the prompt: what stories does a styrofoam box tell, if we're willing to listen? Teacher responses illustrated the far-ranging questions that come when we look closely and think deeply about a commonplace thing. Participants asked questions like, who made these boxes and what are they made of? Who designed them? Why are they shaped the way they're shaped? When did we start using styrofoam for food storage? And what did it replace? In case you haven't gotten a chance to visit yet, I'll go ahead and tell you that neither Banquitas House of Culture nor the Crooked Tree Museum have a styrofoam lunch container on display as a part of their permanent collection. However, each of the questions that teachers asked about this object connects in some way to the stories that our educational spaces tell. Questions about who made something and for what purpose are universally applicable to objects on display in any museum. Likewise, how things move from place to place keys into thinking about how materials and people move across the landscape of Belize and how that's changed over time. How people made and stored food connects us to hunting, fishing, and agriculture, and to past and present issues of sustainability, resource extraction, and environmental degradation. Asking the question of how people stored and protected their food in the past naturally encourages us to seek out someone who might remember a time before styrofoam and creates opportunities for valuable intergenerational dialogue and sharing about the past. One overarching message to teachers participating in the workshop was this: although you may not be able to bring your students into museums as often as you might like, you can still teach them how to be better observers and critical thinkers with any old everyday object. Whether it's a styrofoam container or something else, such lessons from the Belizean present and past teach students how to read the stuff of human history and culture that's around them all the time. This skill allows students to be more critical and thoughtful users of museum collections when they do have the opportunity to visit such places. It also prepares them to ask the kind of critical questions about human history that are essential to understanding who we are, where we came from, and how we ended up with the world we live in now. Our second object lesson gets us thinking about just this. What can we learn from a Caliban? And what is a Caliban anyway? I'll answer that question in a moment, but for reference, here we see my student Avery looking at a Caliban on the second shelf of a display cabinet in the Crooked Tree Museum. The inset photo is a closer look of the object, which was produced for the museum by a craftsman from the Crooked Tree village. Belizean teachers and students are the target audience of the Crooked Tree Museum and are also primary visitors to Banquitas House of Culture. However, both of our institutions also serve educational tourists, people who come to Belize from all around the world to learn about the country, its people, and its past. Here, we discuss strategies for implementing object-based learning with a range of heritage tourism audiences. For our second object lesson, we turn to the Kaliban in the Crooked Tree Museum, one of our very favorite objects, pictured in the very case under consideration by 3 different sets of visitors in these photos. It will help us tell a story about interpretation for multiple audiences. First, a little information. A Caliban is a small pyramid-shaped fall trap used to catch ground birds like pigeon and quail. The Caliban at the Crooked Tree Museum was built by Cardinal Baptist, a community member who remembered constructing and using them as a boy, but who informed us that their use was no longer common in places like Crooked Tree. When the focus of museum content is tied to school curriculum, we can make some assumptions about what children may or may not know when they arrive. This information, called prior knowledge, is based on an understanding of the national curriculum and information that's generally transmitted through family, culture, and experience. Understanding prior knowledge can help us create meaningful learning experiences by connecting what visitors already know about the world to what they see in our museums and cultural heritage spaces. However, Visitor experience is shaped by many factors, only some of which we can control. One model of visitor learning, described by John Falk and Lynn Deerking, shows the 3 overlapping areas of an individual's life that contribute to how they learn when they enter a museum. First, their personal context, their prior knowledge, their motivation, their interests. Second, the physical context, the organization of the learning environment and its materials. Finally, the social context, the experience that a visitor has with others in the museum. As educators, we have limited control over a visitor's personal or social context. However, we can design a physical context that supports learning for a wide range of individuals. When educational experiences have multiple audiences, designing learning becomes more challenging, but it is not impossible. For the most part, educational tourists come with interest in the history and cultures of this country, but will not have more than a preliminary understanding of these things. They likely will not know key vocabulary words, dates, names, or places that are common knowledge for many Belizeans. The Caliban provides one such example. This object garnered a lot of attention at the museum's opening in 2018. Many village elders immediately recognized the trap and shared memories about building them back in those days. During the opening, the Caliban was propped up in the case and had a simple label with the object's name and maker information. It was housed alongside other objects related to living and working in the bush during the height of the logwood and mahogany industries in the late 1800s and early 1900s. For older Belizean visitors, the combination of prior knowledge and contextual information from the case and wall panels made it easy to identify and discuss the historical significance of this object. This summer, we had the opportunity to explore the efficacy of some of these original labels in the museum with a different audience, a group of educational tourists. Belize River East Archaeology project member and museum collaborator, Dr. Astrid Rungladier, brought 20 students from UT Austin to the museum as a part of their study abroad tour. Their level of prior knowledge on Belizean history was varied, but they all had a lot of experience as visitors in a range of museum and cultural heritage spaces. As a part of their visit, the UT Austin students participated in a case study activity. Students adopted a case in the museum and subjected it to close reading and critique. The purpose of this activity was to identify gaps in information and provide the museum team with areas of improvement for future visitors. Just like at the museum's opening, the Kaliban was a high interest object. But when looked at with the prior knowledge of a group of educational tourists, the information provided alongside the object came up very short. While visitors were intrigued by its shape, construction, condition, and name, they did not understand what it was used for, why it was located in the museum, where it was, or even why it was in the museum at all. In today's first lesson, the styrofoam lunch tray helped us think about the power of close looking for understanding objects. The Caliban teaches us a second, more nuanced lesson. Objects alone do not teach. While they can inspire curiosity and reflection, objects need context and often direct interpretation to provide deep learning opportunities for a wide range of audiences. Without your own prior knowledge, what you could learn about this Caliban through close looking alone would be limited. As a result of this exercise, my museum education student Camden and I reinterpreted the Caliban through the simple addition of a few lines of explanatory text and the inclusion of a foam core pigeon inside the trap. We created context that would allow access for people with no prior knowledge while keeping open opportunities for questioning, reflection, and close looking for all visitors. So, in closing, what did we learn from a styrofoam lunch tray and a Caliban? First, objects create powerful opportunities for engaging curiosity about human history and culture. Learning to look at them closely can improve our skills in observation and critical thinking. The styrofoam tray showed us that when we read the things we encounter, we generate many interesting and interdisciplinary questions about people and the world. Finally, these questions create the opportunities to link past and present, old and young, history and culture. Additionally, we learned that in museum settings, objects alone are often not enough to transmit specific lessons about history and culture. Even when people are skilled at close looking, their prior knowledge can limit their ability to understand the stories that objects tell. The Kaliban shows us that interpretation, either through conversation with knowledgeable others or through labels and contextual information, is essential to deepening the engagement and learning that object-based inquiry can generate. In closing, we thank you for your time today. It's really great to share space with people whose passion and curiosity brings them to an organization like HENB. Our project team is happy to provide additional information or resources to anyone interested in learning more, and our contact information is here. In closing, we encourage you to think about these object lessons in both your daily interaction with the material world and in your work as heritage practitioners. You will likely be excited about what the stuff around you can teach. Thank you.